Hey, good morning, everybody. Thank you again for joining me for another video on the series I'm covering Success by Design, your comprehensive planning guide for all types of enterprises. This is my first book I put out in the series and the companion workbook. As a reminder, you can jump onto successbydesign.biz, B-I-Z, and you can get your own copy of the primary book along with the companion workbook so that you can easily navigate through these pages on your own. However, we also do have the video series for you. If you're catching this video on YouTube and you want to watch the other videos that go along with it, each video goes over a portion of the chapter in the book, and it gives you free worksheets that you can download so you can follow along and you can write your own business plan. So last time we talked about financial projections. This time we're going to be looking at chapter 8, which is going to be going over code of ethics. And when something isn't broke, you don't fix it. So I'm actually just going to read a chunk of the first part of this chapter because I love what I wrote. And I might be a little biased, but I think it hits really well on exactly what we're trying to cover in the purpose of a code of ethics for you and your organization and why you would want to incorporate into your business plan. So the quote I have on here is Fearless Culture Design, Zappos Culture Design Canvas. This is a quote that says, "We believe that it's really important to come up with core values that you can commit to. And by commit, we mean that you are willing to hire and fire based on them. If you're willing to do that, then you're well on your way to building a company culture that is in line with the brand you want to build." So let me give you a little insight on why I think that this quote is so good. And it comes to vision, mission, values, company culture. How does all that play into code of ethics? So a little story that I go over in the book is about a project that I took on in Nashville, Tennessee. So this is in 2019. I'm working with a tech-centric visionary, and we worked on home renovations, community engagement events, and building the internal and external teams. My role carried many aspects outside of the coaching realm. I was a project manager, I was a business coach, and I was even given the title Director of People and Culture. My job was to ensure that the people internally and externally were all communicating, happy, and thriving in their respective roles, whatever was associated with the company. This proved to be a challenge for multiple reasons. The first and primary reason being that we didn't have written guidelines to maintain consistency and direction when it came to operations. There was no protocol on how to deal with conflict and no expectation set for how everyone was expected to behave within the boundaries of the company. Okay, so while I believed the intentions of the visionary were really amazing and well-rounded in theory, we really lacked the framework that was necessary to hold the team together. So think of this code of ethics. It's like the glue that keeps all of these other things you've been working on held together, okay? So a lot of business owners do this, and it can be really difficult for people to grab a hold of the vision and understand the rules of the game or have fun playing that game if these rules keep changing along the way, okay? Most successful business owners, and statistically the data says this as well, have one major thing in common. Their people inside of their organization love working there. So who you recruit, who on your team, who you do business with, all matter greatly, okay? And it matters more that they understand the rules they have to behave and operate within that's within the construct of your company. These rules are considered your code of ethics, policies and procedures, and or bylaws. We've talked about this in previous chapters. We also talk about this in other series of the book series. So we talk about it in Success by Design, Accountability and Implementation, and we talk about it in Success by Design, Steps to Starting, Managing, and Growing Your Enterprise, okay? Very important information here. We talk about all these things. Every action and interaction with your business should fit within your guidelines, okay? So in this chapter, when we talk about code of ethics, your code of ethics becomes a document that outlines how you expect people within your organization to behave according to your value system and your policies. Your code of ethics will also point to other documents. So it's a signpost or a guidepost that points people within your company or whoever's reading this to other documents that you have developed with managing those expectations. So those might be employee handbooks, standard operating procedures. I mentioned bylaws. There might be a bunch of different things that you have documented that is outlined in your code of ethics to say, we follow this policy and guideline, reference our employee handbook, chapter, point, whatever it is, okay? So these set standards can be updated regularly to meet ever-changing needs, including industry standards and regulations, okay? So the chapter that I have here regarding code of ethics, that just kind of formalizes what's the whole point and purpose of a code of ethics, and why would you put it in your business plan? Well, obviously, it's a guide of how you expect people inside and outside of your company to interact and behave, and how you are committing to behave and treat other people as well. And like I said in the quote, you will hire and fire people based on this information and these values that you put in place, okay? So you definitely need to have it. Now, I'm gonna list a few of the different topics that we cover that are in the book, in the chapter that we discuss. This is not an exhaustive list of topics that you should cover in your code of ethics. You're going to need, and there are suggestions in here, you're going to need to find and implement the ones that are important for your business, your industry. And sometimes you need to think about what are your industry regulations. You need to have a policy around, so those are things to consider as well. All right, so these are the topics I cover in the chapter, and I'm gonna go over each one as well from the book. So you have this information to get some insight on what is the purpose of this specific topic and what information are you trying to obtain in order to put it into your policy. And then you can go to the free worksheet and download the template for code of ethics. It lists the topics and you put in your own policy or code, and then you can expand on anything that you feel like you need to, or add or omit information based on your business, your structure, your enterprise, and your needs, okay? So the topics we talked about, number one is company structure. We look at filing responsibilities. We look at insurances. A topic is record keeping and file storage, confidential and proprietary data, brand identity and messaging, management and leadership, employees and staff members, fringe benefits, vendors and subcontractors. We talk about violation of code of ethics. What's the process there? Financial data management, customer refunds and cancellations, receiving and giving gifts, tithes and donations, conflict resolution. Those are not an exhaustive list. Those are just some of the things that we cover in this chapter, okay? So you need to make sure that you define those for you. All right, and remember that as you're going through this process, if you make a note in your code of ethics that says reference the employee handbook, you now have a task to create your employee handbook. And so you're gonna have to do some more research to find out what needs to go into your employee handbook or any other external document outside of your code of ethics, okay? Keep that in mind. So you'll explain the policy in further detail in that external document outside of your code of ethics. So company structure. So use this as an opportunity to write the structure of your organization, such as corporation, nonprofit, limited liability company, LLP. We talked about all of that as well when we talk about structure. And we also go over that in success by design, implementation, and accountability when we talk about the structure of your organization. I believe that is in, I'm sorry, that's I apologize. That's in success by design, steps to starting, growing, and managing your enterprise. That is chapter 2 when we're talking about organizational structure. So are you an LLC? Are you a nonprofit? Are you for profit? Are you a corporation? Like, what's the structure? And so you talk all about those things. We talk about bylaws. We talk about the different things that you need to have in place. So if you want to get real dialed in on these external documents, they are covered in some of those additional books. So make sure you're going online and you're grabbing your copies of those as well at successbydesign.biz. All right, so you're going to be talking about how frequently you meet or reference those documents, like I mentioned, that govern the company structure and the process of decision-making for your organization. Your filing responsibilities, you're going to list the process and responsible parties who are responsible for properly filing all state and federal licenses, permits, and tax requirements in a timely manner. Insurance, so you're going to need to consider, and we do talk about this as well when we look at your financial projections and overhead costs, general, professional, workers' compensation, and other liability insurance. What are you required to have? What are you required to carry? What are the mandates there? And also, what do you need to have in order just to protect yourself and the company you are starting? So those are great questions to check with legal requirements specific to your industry, and also check in with maybe a professional attorney that can help you in these areas as well. So also include how you plan to manage and track that information ongoing and who's responsible for managing it, okay? A lot of this also can be added to job descriptions we discussed in previous recordings. So if you come up and you're like, hey, this person is responsible for our filings, maybe it's our accountant, maybe it's our bookkeeper, whatever it might be, make sure that information is also logged under their job description too, okay? And you could just start recording standard operating procedures for each of these areas as well. All right, we go over record keeping and file storage. This is really just listing your expectations for how files will be stored and information will be recorded. Be sure to include your process, list the systems you plan to use electronically, either now or in the future, and how often you plan to purge those records. Now, this code of ethics might be a very sensitive document, so do not send this out to every single person on your team. Be very clear on who needs to see this, specific to their role, specific to what they do. You need to make sure that it's embedded in other areas of your business, specific to their roles and responsibilities as well, okay? Confidential and proprietary data. So this is where you are writing you're writing down what your expectations on confidentiality and proprietary information within your organization are. And you also want to consider the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, DMCA of 1998, when you put your policy, you put together your policy. So if you don't know what that is, I highly recommend that you go and research it. But you definitely need to follow the protocols when it comes to data, electronic data that is being stored, especially digital, especially in the digital age that we're in, okay? And that might also go back to some of those overhead costs where you may need to implement a security protocol and plan to make sure that this stuff is updated regularly and that you are safe and secure internally with your data. But also if you have customer data and things of that nature, you need to make sure you are taking care of that too. So this is where you would put those policies in place, and then you would implement the things necessary, the tasks necessary to manage those policies and make sure they are being executed according to your policy. All right, we look at brand identity and messaging. How do you expect your team to communicate to the general public about your organization? So if something comes out, if you've got people that want to just market information, you have to make sure that your messaging and you're coming across to the general public consistently meets your expectations as a company. What are the values that you're talking about? Making sure that whatever representation that's being given into the market, whether it's public, community, whether it's having conversations with employees, whether it's your clients, whatever it might be, you need to make sure that everybody is on the same page for your public relations, okay? So what is the brand identity? What is the messaging? And what's the protocol around information being given out to the general public or written or verbal communications, okay? So marketing, content, distribution, who's allowed to do it, who needs to get approval, what's the approval process, all of that information. Include your process for delivery of this information, who's responsible for information updates and delivery ongoing. So making sure that if you make a change from the top level on a brand or maybe some form of logo or messaging, that it's also being sent down to every other area of your business, okay? Where it touches. Recruitment and staffing. What is your process for recruiting and staffing talent within your company? How will you promote within? Who is responsible for this process? When will you recruit and staff? Include any verbiage regarding non-discriminatory practices and how you will measure ongoing staff performance. So be very transparent on that. And especially when it comes to policy around maybe you do want to promote within. So being very clear and transparent about that as well. So just talking about those things. And again, you may end up putting things of that nature in more detail in an employee handbook that goes into more expanded information on what they can expect and how you expect them to behave and act within the bounds of your organization. Advancement opportunities as well. What type of opportunities will you create and how will they be made available to staff within your organization? Management and leadership. How do you expect your management and leadership team to communicate, manage, and lead others within your organization? It's not a given. You do need to talk about these things and you need to spell them out. The same with employees and staff members. What are your general requirements and expectations? Again, this all can be drilled down into an employee handbook. And there are a lot of companies out there, a lot of payroll companies who specialize in getting these documents. They have templates for you. You can also go online and find free employee handbook templates. Again, use those templates to structure your own organization. Make sure you omit the things that do not apply and you add things that you are not considering. You can look that up as well. Fringe benefits, include that in there. Vendors and subcontractors. I love including this because this is so important. How will you hire vendors and subcontractors? What's your protocol? What's your policy? What industry requirements do you need to consider? Do they need special licensing, certifications, or insurance? Okay. How will you document this process? How will you expect them to behave when representing your company or working with your team members? So if you hire a third party vendor or contractor and they are working under your umbrella, how do you expect them to behave and operate and act? And that's something that needs to be spelled out as well. And who's responsible for liabilities, okay? And how will it be handled? Then you have violation of code of ethics. What happens when someone violates your code of ethics? How will you handle this situation? Will you document the information? And if so, you need to list your process out. What's your step-by-step process, okay? Include verbal and written communication and steps of escalation that may lead to termination of the relationship. Keep that in mind. What are the things that are the steps that would lead to termination of that relationship? And you need to make sure that you're consistent. So if there's ever a violation of your code of ethics or even a conflict issues, we talk about conflict resolution as well. You need to go to the book, the policy on this, and follow it every single time. And then if you see on an annual basis, a quarterly basis, you need to make adjustments to say, is this policy still valid? Do we need to update it? Do we need to do something different? Okay. Financial data management and reporting. What are your expectations for financial management and reporting? Will you have a staff bookkeeper or accountant? How do you expect them to handle financial data and money management? Be sure to include your expectations for anyone who will be handling these areas in your business. So if someone is not to be looking at these things, making sure that confidential information is kept confidential, making sure that accessibility is also separated as well. Refunds, customer cancellations. What are your refund policies? How will refunds be processed and what criteria constitutes a refund? Consider how your organization also expects to give gifts to other organizations that you support locally or otherwise. What is your process for giving these gifts and who will make overall decisions and what criteria will determine what you are able to give? That's for gift, tithes, and gifts. I can speak, tithes and donations. And then we have conflict resolution. I mentioned that earlier. Consider how you plan to solve conflicts both internally with staff, coworkers, and management, and externally with clients, vendors, or others who interact with your company. What is your process for handling the conflict? What should others do to follow that process? And how will the process be documented? And what happens if it cannot be resolved? Consider your industry, your organization, and your expectations of how you will behave and expect others to behave within your organization. And then if you look at your code of ethics, you're going to describe additional topics that you might want to add. So I consider other topics such as diversity, equity, and inclusion, government contracting, international affairs. There are so many different things to consider. So keep that in mind when you're looking at your code of ethics. Again, go to successbydesign.biz. You can grab your copy of the book to get more detail, and you can also get the workbook to fill out the process on your own, or you can watch the video like we just did. It should get the wheels turning. Use the free templates, download those, and then you can go ahead and start writing your own code of ethics. Thanks again for listening, and stay tuned for more information. Like and subscribe on all of our link handles, YouTube, and on our website. Again, you can find all of these handles as well as more information at successbydesign.biz. Thank you so much.